while back, I shared the 3 phases of fat loss and exactly what to do in order to maximize your fat burning in each phase. Because each phase does have different strategies, and if you don't use them, then you're not really going to see the best results. So today I'm diving into exactly what to eat in each phase of fat loss, as well as a lot of different meal ideas so that you can maximize your results. Let's dive into it. My name's Autumn. I'm a certified clinical nutritionist with my master's in nutrition human performance. On my channel, I share the science-backed and delicious details on how to achieve your weight loss and wellness dreams. So if you're new here, make sure you subscribe. Today's video is also sponsored by Kettle and Fire, but more on them in a bit. Okay, phase 1 is what I call the refuel and rebuild phase. To recap this a bit, if you missed it from my last video on this topic, this phase is from a long time of under eating and just using the typical eat less, move more. This results in people being more carb sensitive, losing muscle, and have a much slower metabolism. So the main goal during this phase is to help rebuild and re-nourish the body. That way it can tell the brain and the body that you're no longer in the state of semi-starvation and you can actually start to ramp up the metabolism again. Now, it is very important that you don't skip this phase, otherwise you will be stuck in this phase, which means that you're going to be stuck eating a 1200 or 1400 calorie diet just even for maintenance. And there are some exercise and lifestyle tools I talk about in that other video, which if you do want to check out, I'll have it linked right up here. But specifically from a food perspective, this is what you'll want to focus on: protein, fat, and low glycemic load carbs. Let's start with the protein. Protein is really needed to signal to the brain that your body is no longer in this state of semi-starvation. In fact, there's this whole scientific theory called the protein leverage hypothesis that our body is just always searching and always seeking out enough protein for our needs from our food. And we won't really be satisfied until we actually get the amino acids and the protein that we need. Hence why getting enough protein is so important for actually rebuilding the metabolism and telling your body that you're no longer in the state of semi-starvation. But protein also makes you feel full so that you don't crave sugar, which obviously makes it so much easier to achieve and maintain a weight loss goal. And each person does have different protein needs, so I created a completely free protein calculator. If you want to check that out, I'll have the link pop up right here somewhere, but I'll also have the link for that down description below. But a good place to start for most people is about 30 grams of protein per meal, and ideally sticking to 3 meals and no snacks. This is the one category of food that really won't change throughout your journey, so you want to make sure you get it right from the start. The protein should also be high diaz proteins, which means that they are very digestible, very easy for our body to absorb and use as proteins. These include foods like beef, whole milk Greek yogurt or skyr, chicken and turkey, fish, tempeh if you're plant-based, whey isolate protein powder, eggs, and shellfish. And then we have the fat component. This is an area you also do not want to skip because even though it has the word fat in it, it's actually very important for a fat loss goal. And that's because it does also help to raise our satiety hormones and make us feel full and satisfied. It also provides the necessary micronutrients for our body to actually thrive. But the biggest focus, especially during phase 1 with your fat intake, is making sure that it is primarily from whole food fat sources. The amount will range depending on the individual, but I found between 1 to 4 servings of fat at each meal is a good range. And the food list of high quality fats to include during this phase include things like avocado, olives, seeds, fats that are naturally found in dairy, meat, fish, and eggs, and then nuts, although you do have to be careful with these as some people can tend to overeat them, especially if it's not properly balanced with protein. And then some lightly processed fats, especially if you're using it for cooking, like ghee, olive oil, and butter. And then there's the low glycemic load carbs. Low glycemic load means that they don't really raise our blood sugar very much, so they tend to be really high in fiber, they tend to be more nutrient dense, they also tend to be more satiating, which means that you're going to be more satisfied and you're not going to be feeling hungry during the weight loss process, which is another signal to the brain that you're not in that state of semi-starvation. And during this phase, you can pretty much eat as much as you want from this low glycemic load carb category, as long as you're making sure that you're first eating enough protein and fat. And a food list of this category can include things like nearly all whole fruits, except for banana, which might be tricky for some people if you are carb sensitive. Dried and juiced fruits are not included in this category. And then pretty much all vegetables except for things like potatoes and sweet potatoes. During my own 20-pound postpartum weight loss journey, I found it so important that I really only stuck to this low glycemic load category during this phase 1. And you can actually make a lot of delicious meals during this phase 1 using a mixture of each of those 3 categories of food. Some of my favorites include things like my zucchini lasagna recipe, which I've shared on my YouTube channel before. I'll have it linked right up here. And then my pineapple lemon power smoothie, tropical lemon chia pudding, lemony kale salad with grilled chicken, and then salmon cakes with roasted veggies. And before we move on, I want to give a huge thank you today's sponsor, Kettle and Fire. Kettle and Fire is my all-time favorite bone broth company because they slowly simmer bones from grass-fed cows to make sure that they're pulling out as much collagen and nutrients as possible. And especially during this like rebuild and re-nourish phase, having some bone broth can really help to improve that nourishment. And I love using bone broth, but it's not something I necessarily love to make because as a mom of 2 and a business owner, I don't really have the time to slowly simmer bone broth and then have it cool and then individually store it. It's just a whole process that I don't have time for. So I love that Kettle and Fire makes adding high quality bone broth into my meals so easy and so convenient. I just reach into my pantry and I can add it to pretty much anything like my chili, my stews, and my soups. And Kettle and Fire is super generous and they're offering my community 20% off your bone broth purchase when you use code AUTUMNBAITS at checkout. So make sure you stock up and I'll have the link down description below. Okay, and then we get into phase 2 of fat loss, and that's the magic, aka where a lot of the fat loss actually happens. During that phase 1 is all about rebuilding and re-nourishing so you can set your body up for success. For me, this took like 1 or 2 months. And then it was like suddenly magic happened. And all of those tools that I used, all the meals that really helped to rebuild and re-nourish my body, set me up for success and made it so that all of a sudden I was losing a lot of fat pretty quickly. And specifically fat, which is really important for a long-term weight loss goal. The body is out of that starvation mode. The metabolism tends to be a little bit higher at this point. The body's more nourished and the metabolism is just quite frankly cranking. So from a food perspective, this is what you want to do to make sure you continue to capitalize on those results. First off, let's go back to the protein. This is something that you will want to keep the same. This should not go down. If anything, you'll want to increase it, especially if you found that you've started to increase muscle mass a little bit and therefore your body has increased needs. You could always go back to my free protein calculator and just do like a reassessment and just check things out there. But it is very important to not slack on the protein as you continue on through each of these phases. Otherwise, it is very easy to slip back into that phase 1 of semi-starvation, not to mention all the sugar cravings that go along with it. And then in the fats category, we also want to keep this the same. Although depending on the person and depending on where you're at in your journey, you might want to experiment with increasing your fats by 1 or 2 servings per meal if you notice that you're starting to get significantly more hungry, and making sure it's still in that 1 to 4 servings range. So like if you started off with 1 serving of fat at each meal and after 2 months you're suddenly starting to feel more hungry even though you're eating enough protein, that's where you could increase the fats by like 2 servings at each meal. Once you've hit your protein needs, you can use the fats to kind of tweak how much you should be having at each meal in order to actually feel satisfied. But then we get into the carbs category. This is something that might change or could potentially stay the same depending on where you're at in your journey. Now, if you are somebody who is more carb sensitive, you're more insulin resistant, you probably still want to stay only in that low glycemic load range and eating as much as you want from that category until you're actually in the phase 3 of your journey. But if you're not carb sensitive, if you're not insulin resistant, then during this phase 2, especially if you're exercising and especially if you're strength training, could be a good time to add in like 1 serving of a medium glycemic load carb per day. Medium glycemic load carbs include things like bananas and lentils and chickpeas and beans, but these types of carbs can help to refuel the muscles, especially after a workout. So you're actually going to be getting better results from your workout, which can help to further fuel your fat loss journey. So the meal examples for this would be pretty much all the same types of foods that you're eating during that phase 1, although you might be adding in an additional serving of fat or incorporating some of those medium glycemic load carbs. So that might be like adding some banana into a smoothie or making my crunchy spiced chickpeas and putting that on top of your salad or along with your meal. Or perhaps even adding beans to your cauliflower nachos. Okay, and then we get into phase 3, which is maintenance. This is where you're at or pretty much at your fat loss goal. And because of the lower body fat and because you're probably incorporating some type of exercise that's increasing your muscle mass a bit, you're likely going to be more hungry and have higher energy demands. At this phase, a lot of people tend to be a lot less carb sensitive as well, which means that you can tolerate medium and sometimes even high glycemic load carbs on the occasion. But when you are increasing your intake, especially with those different types of carbohydrates, it's really important that you're increasing the right types of foods so that you don't slip back into that phase 1. So here's what you want to focus on during phase 3 with your food. Protein and fat will still stay the same. It's the carbs or things start to change a little bit. If you didn't already experiment with adding in the medium glycemic load carbs, then this would be the time, and especially doing it on exercise days. Or if you're already having medium glycemic load carbs and you're having them every night or every day, even on days that you aren't exercising, and you're still maintaining progress, then this could be a time to incorporate some higher quality, high glycemic load carbs specifically on days that you are strength training or doing some type of exercise. And anywhere between a half to 1 cup would be considered 1 serving. So these type of higher quality, higher glycemic load carbs could be foods like sweet potato, real fermented sourdough, lentil and chickpea based pastas, potatoes, whole grains or pseudo grains like quinoa, buckwheat, oats, corn, corn and masa, brown rice, and wild rice. Especially with increased exercise and especially as muscle mass starts to increase a bit, these types of higher glycemic load carbs on exercise days can help to fuel that muscle for muscle recovery and help you to actually see better results. This is something that I experienced during my own postpartum weight loss journey. When I got to phase 3, I did start to incorporate some of those high glycemic load carbs on exercise days, and I actually experienced an additional 2-pound fat loss as a result because I was seeing better results from my exercise. So some meal ideas might be like the curried veggies plate with sweet potato and chickpeas, or having some type of high protein overnight oats, pairing a slice of sourdough with your ploughman's platter, or using a few fresh corn tortillas to go along with your breakfast for dinner tacos. Now the exact meal plan and the exact strategies to optimize for fat loss, plus the food list and over 50 delicious recipes can actually be found in my body recomposition program if you want more of that step-by-step guidance. It covers not only the food, but also the other lifestyle components that are really important for optimizing for fat loss, like exercise and sleep. This is a program that I developed and followed to achieve my own 20-pound postpartum fat loss journey. This program is also wildly popular within our community for achieving sustainable fat loss results without having to count calories or feel hungry during the process. And of course, while eating delicious meals, because that is very important to me. So if you want to check out my body recomposition program, I'll have it pop up right here somewhere. I'll also have it linked down description below, or you can find it on my website at autumnlnutrition.shop. Now, if you want to check out that other video that deep dives into the additional strategies for fat loss and how to maximize for each phase, you can find that with this video right here. Also, if you're new to my channel and you love this science-backed information, make sure you subscribe right here. Come out new videos every Tuesday and Thursday. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next video.